CMS, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, are on the warpath against the Medicare insurance agent distribution world. And it's apparent by the yearly, at this point, around this time of the year, CMS final rules that have come out the previous 3 years in a row, with this year's final rule that will be dropping at some point. We anticipate being the third consecutive year we've had a radical final ruling come out that can completely change the landscape and really attack the Medicare insurance agent distribution world. In this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly why this is happening, the history of it, and what you need to know, and what can we as agents really do about it.
This video is brought to you by none other than Hire Heroes, you guys. Hire Heroes is your one-stop shop when it comes to virtual staffing and making sure that you have qualified talent with your business. One thing that I love about Hire Heroes, you guys, is they've actually gone through the process already of vetting and making sure that your staff member is well trained to best fit your needs. Whether you need help with social media work, posting things on your accounts, responding to people that send messages to your social media accounts, whether you need help with data entry, or a multitude of other things that they're qualified to do, Hire Heroes has got you covered. If you're having trouble finding quality talent, and number two, affording to be able to run payroll for that talent, Hire Heroes has got you covered with an affordable alternative to have a virtual assistant working for your business. There's a link down in the description of this video to where you can learn more about getting your own VA through Hire Heroes. I certainly recommend it. They're what we use in our business for all of our virtual assistant needs, and you will want to make sure that you check them out today.
I think to first understand why this is happening, I think it's important to really rewind and think about what ends up happening at the top of CMS. Who is in charge of CMS? Who puts them in power? And how is this relevant for you? Well, the first thing that you need to understand is the administrator and the director of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is appointed by our sitting president. So if you've noticed, the real radical changes and the attacks against the agent force have begun, as far as I'm concerned, with the first final rule that we saw in 2022. The current administrator of CMS is Chiquita Brooks LaShore. Chiquita Brooks LaShore was appointed by the Biden administration and assumed office May 27th, 2021, shortly after President Biden took office and the Biden administration assumed the White House. It's perfectly natural to assume that taking your political beliefs out of it, it's just common sense to think when you have a Democratic president in office, we're probably more likely to get a Democratic and more pro-regulation CMS leadership. On the flip side, if you have a conservative or a Republican in the office, you're going to have a CMS director appointed that is probably going to pull back regulation on the agent force. Anytime we brush these waters, whether it be Democrat, Republican, or the differences between the two, everybody gets a little sensitive and everybody gets a little touchy. But for the sake of this video and the sake of this conversation and the sake of the future of agents, let's really take our personal feelings out of it and just speak facts. And I think the facts are Democrats are more pro-regulation, Republicans are more against regulation. This is as true as the test of time over the previous decades, okay? So it's perfectly natural to assume if you have a Democratic president take the White House, we are then in extension getting a CMS commissioner who also has very Democratic viewpoints and is pro-increased regulation. It's just going to come with the territory, and those increased regulations are expected to come. Brooks LaShore has shown in a very short period of time to be one of, if not the most radical CMS commissioners that we've ever had, with the final rulings getting more and more radical and more obscene every single year. We look back in the first final rule that happened under the watch of Brooks LaShore that came out in 2022 that implemented the call recording rule for agents. Many of you probably know it well. This rule required that Medicare agents record all phone calls and store them for 10 years, a burden on the average agent that seemed overwhelming at the time. You got to remember, there's so many agents out there as 1099 employees that are one-man shows. They work out of maybe their home and they drive to appointments. They talk to clients on their cell phone. There is a lot of agents that fall into this type of category. Not everybody has a big office with a big staff and a lot of technology and a lot of systems in place. This is just the fact of the matter. So CMS requiring this was a huge burden on the agent force. It starts with a proposal. We then get a final rule shortly thereafter that kicked in October of 2022. The following year, 2023, last year, we have multiple rules that get proposed, including, most notably, the return of the 48-hour scope of appointment rule, which ends up getting passed in a final rule that kicks in October of 2023, this past AEP as of recording this video. Not to be forgotten, a proposal that was in the 2023 original proposal that did not make it into the final rule was essentially, in layman's terms, CMS looking to ban all insurance agents from being able to purchase leads from third parties, meaning that the agent would be responsible for generating their own lead, getting a referral, or essentially not doing business at all. An incredibly radical change that would cripple a lot of the agent force. This ultimately did not make it into the final rule, but CMS did not fail to point out that while they were not passing it now, they reserve the right to pick it up again and look at it in the future, meaning that it very well could happen at some point. Then you have the proposal that went out now, and everybody's been commenting on this, and everybody's been talking about this. I did a live stream with my partner in crime on Emergency Podcast named Glenn Shelton, and we did an hour-long live stream about this when the proposal first dropped, but since then I've been relatively quiet. The reason being is because I've been kind of gathering my thoughts and wanting to put out the right message for you now. January 5th has come and gone, which essentially was the deadline for agents to be able to provide feedback and comments to CMS regarding this latest proposal. Now, what is this latest proposal, you might be asking? Well, the latest proposal is one that covers a multitude of different subjects, but the most notable, the one that's been getting the most attention, is the fact that they are proposing radical changes that could essentially cripple, reduce, or maybe even in an extreme scenario, wipe out FMO compensation whatsoever in the Medicare space. It is going after what they call administrative fees, which is essentially anything that could be an incentive for an enrollment that is above and beyond the Medicare set compensation rules for Medicare Advantage and Part D prescription drug plans. This would mean overrides could be dramatically reduced, or if not completely wiped out, depending on what ends up happening. It could mean marketing money ends up being reduced, if not completely wiped out. It could mean HRAs for agents ends up getting completely wiped out. But the most notable things to me is overrides, hierarchies, and marketing money, which essentially is a majority of the revenue that FMOs use to keep their lights on and keep their doors open and run their payroll and provide support for agents. Now, whether you like FMOs or not, the opinion of it seems to be mixed in some circles of the agent force. FMOs, field marketing organizations, are the top of hierarchy organizations that provide so much value to our industry. Anyone with a basic level of understanding of our industry could see that. But the problem here is Brooks LaShore and the rest of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services team do not understand our industry at all. How did we end up getting here? How did we get to the point where there's such radical changes? And it almost looks like a witch hunt against the agent force. I certainly look at it as a witch hunt. Every single year, they're trying to solve problems by going after everybody that didn't cause them in the first place. What we're seeing is previous to Brooks LaShore taking office with the Biden administration, we had the CMS commissioner by the name of Seema Verma, appointed by the Trump administration. Now, Trump, essentially being a Republican, is what? Anti-regulation. So, of course, we get a CMS commissioner that's anti-regulation as well. So when we get into CMS commissioner that's anti-regulation, what happens? Regulation starts to get pulled back. This is around the time that we saw the 48-hour scope of appointment rule get pulled back because we had a commissioner that was more for businesses, more for less regulation under the Trump administration. But anytime you get less regulation, it opens up opportunity for more bad actors, fraudsters, and people looking to bend and, for lack of a better description, break the rules overall. This came in many forms. It came in shady call centers doing essentially borderline illegal things to get in touch and essentially connect a Medicare beneficiary with one of their call center representatives. It came with a lot of these big shady call centers enrolling people without their consent, not telling them that what they're being enrolled into, lying on the phones about plans, and it became a real problem. And that doesn't even include the rampant Medicare advertising that went absolutely bonkers. I'm talking about the Medicare advertising that we've all seen over the past couple of years that has to do with high promises, right? Promising $5,000 in dental benefits, promising $200 a month in a grocery card, regardless of who you are, which we all know is only available to a finite amount of a percentage of the population, and of course can vary place by place. These are the problems that we saw more than anything else, but these problems did not come from the independent brokerage force. These problems were really caused by the big call centers and bad actors and organizations that really just saw Medicare in the last couple of years as an opportunity, jumped in, and have kind of ruined it for everybody. I 100% believe that the individual independent brokerage force is the small minority of the problems that we've seen and do things right by the Medicare beneficiary the majority of the time. I know so many people in our great industry that are wonderful people that just want to serve their clients and do the best thing for them and do business the right way. Now, to be 100% objective about this, the previous CMS commissioner, Seema, that served under the Trump administration had her share of problems as well. It was the other end of the pendulum. It was maybe even, dare I say, too little regulation. She had public controversies about taxpayer money. She ended up resigning after the election that nominated President Biden to take the White House. So she had her fair share of issues as well, but on the other side of the pendulum, I am, in theory, for proper rules and regulations to control the bad actors, the false advertising, and to protect seniors in theory. I think the biggest point is with CMS not understanding and the current CMS administrator not understanding who is actually causing the problems and having even the basic finite understanding of our industry. It boggles my mind, personally, that CMS does not understand FMOs, their business model, and the role they play. To me, it's a basic idea and principle, not just within the Medicare space, but in all insurance circles. Hierarchies are a very common thing and a very necessary thing for an insurance industry to function as a whole. They hold everything up. And so I'm all for rules that actually make positive changes, but the problem is CMS is not capable of passing rules that actually solve problems. I would go as far as to say the rules we had before were just fine. The rules we had before were in no part to be blamed. It was more the enforcement of the rules. So not more rules are not necessary. It's the enforcement of the old rules. Now, of course, as we know, CMS cannot enforce rules by themselves. They're a very small agency. Most people don't realize this, but the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services only have 6,000 employees compared to a United Healthcare that has north of 300,000. They need the carriers to enforce compliance, training, and regulation. And the carriers depend heavily on the FMOs to help enforce training, rules, and regulation. This is what CMS doesn't understand. If FMOs are essential to policing things, cutting them out and cutting their legs out from under them makes every problem worse. So in theory, rules and regulation are helpful, but when they're passed by an organization that, one, has no ability to explain them, uphold them, or enforce them, and two, an organization in CMS that has no understanding of the industry that it's regulating, therefore, that is where we see the biggest problem. So, I ask you, If that is the case, and if the biggest problems were pushed by bad actors, marketing organizations, large corrupt call centers, and not as much by the independent force, why so is the independent agent force the ones getting targeted the most? Well, the truth be told, it's because CMS doesn't understand the Medicare industry. They never have, and they've never really cared to. CMS is made up by a lot of people that I would call pencil pushers, a lot of people that I would say are removed from society, removed from reality, bureaucrats of sorts. And they do not know what's really going on the ground. They really don't know what's going on a day-to-day basis in the life of a Medicare beneficiary. They don't know what's going on in a lot of these insurance agencies and agents' offices across the country that do a fantastic job and a fantastic service. They don't know what's going on behind the doors of a lot of these FMOs that really provide services, technology, support to agents to help them provide a better Medicare customer experience. And when there's a lack of understanding of who the real culprit is of causing the problems, they go after the wrong person. If you look at the committee hearing that was done in the Senate back in October that really preceded the first proposal that came out, you saw 3 people that were giving testimony to this committee. Was it anybody in NABIP? No. Was it anybody with an FMO or integrity marketing group or AmeriLife or any individual insurance agent that has a large voice and a large following? No. It was a ship worker. Ship workers historically hate insurance agents. They are as biased of a voice as you're going to find. A local regional carrier that hates large carriers because they have a hard time competing with large carriers. Biased voice. An individual that creates a technology platform for Medicare beneficiaries that admits on the panel that the driving force behind him doing what he does is his parents did business with an agent that he feels like maybe did them dirty, an isolated event. And in his mind, he feels like all agents are bad from this one encounter. A slew of individuals that, in my opinion, do not speak for the industry, but this is where they're getting their feedback from. This is where they're getting their tiny scope of what's going on and what the problems really are. I do feel like the best thing we can do at this point in time is come together as an industry, work together, pool resources, do everything we can to provide messaging, communication, and fight back on this. The commentary to CMS might have been closed, but you can always still write to your congressman. You can always still write to your senators. You can always still make your voice heard to the best of your abilities. The large organizations are working behind the scenes to make sure that something that really damages the Medicare beneficiary and the Medicare industry does not pass. But at the end of the day, if FMOs end up on the chopping block and FMOs end up going, they are the first line of defense if they ever want to just completely try to eradicate agents altogether. I have no reason to specifically believe this is their long-term plan, but if you look at the history and you look at the pattern over the past 3 years from these proposals and final rules, there is a concerted effort to target individual agents and make their lives harder and essentially try to squeeze them out of business. I don't think there's any denying that at this point. Some might say that I have a tinfoil hat on with these predictions, but if FMOs go, they are the first line of defense for the agent force. Without FMOs, agents are solo individuals. They are lone wolves. They contract directly with the insurance carriers. They have nothing provided for them. They don't get the same level of support. They don't get tools like Medicare Center. They don't get tools like Sunfire, Connecture, CSG Actuarial. All of those are gone. They can't have an upline or a mentor to ask questions to. There's going to be 2 different situations. Either an agent would be able to go LOA to somebody and get the same kind of resources they got before, and the person they're LOA to takes a little bit off the top in exchange for that because they have to get compensated from somewhere. Or 2, they're a lone wolf, like I just mentioned. And that essentially, in my opinion, weakens the agent force nationally by a lot. And a weaker agent force is easier to take out. In my opinion, I believe the long-term goal based on the patterns of what I've seen and what I'm hearing behind closed doors, is if they could, they'd love to get to a place where we have a self-enrollment system that's similar to the marketplace for Medicare Advantage plans, and agents aren't needed anymore. I believe we're trying to be pushed out. And I believe the best thing we can do right now is make our voices heard in the ways that we've talked about over the course of this video. In addition to that, we have a presidential election coming up. And while I do not typically get anywhere near politics with my channels and my messaging with you guys, I believe this current administration has appointed the most radical CMS commissioner we could possibly have that is coming for you and me. And I don't believe they are going to stop. And I think the best thing we can do right now is hope we get a new administration in the office and they appoint a new CMS commissioner. Because you know what has the biggest impact? That right there. I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Comment your thoughts down below. If you found this video helpful, insightful, you feel like this message needs to get out to more people in the industry, you can help make that happen by smashing the like button for the YouTube algorithm. This is an important message. I believe that this is really spot on what I feel like is going on right now. It's more important than ever that we all come together, work together for our common goal of protecting the future and the sanctity of our amazing industry that does so much good for Medicare beneficiaries. Far more good than negative. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.